Good afternoon, everyone. Is it okay? I'll try it one more time. There we go. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How is everyone's day? You enjoying London's Calling?
Yes.
This is my first time. I am so excited to be here with all of you. My name is David Carnes. I am the founder and chairman of a consulting firm based in Boston and Toronto. We're called OpFocus. We work with SaaS companies to optimize revenue operations. So somehow, just 2 days ago, we had our 18th anniversary. And client number one was a software company in New York City. And I can't believe, thinking back to how simple the platform was. But interestingly, reporting hasn't really changed all that much in all these years. So it's kind of an interesting thing. What I want to talk to you about today is taking your Salesforce reporting to the next level. Most of the time when I talk about Salesforce reporting, I'm sort of hunched over my keyboard and demoing. And I didn't really want to do that with this presentation. I want to talk about just other things to help enhance your reporting. Sorry. So I want to talk to you about first things first. And this, I wrote a book that came out a year ago called Mastering Salesforce Reports and Dashboards. And I started the book, oh, thank you. It took 18 months. It was a long time, but wonderful experience. And I started the book off the same way, just thinking, before we even touch a keyboard, there are some things that we should think about and be aware of. The next thing I want to talk about is that moment when somebody asks you, and they come up to you and say, I have this thing, I just changed companies, I have this thing that I brought, it's in Excel, here you go, and just how to react to that. I want to talk about that. Then I want to talk to you about how things appear. So in all reporting, real estate is precious. So we have to make good choices about what we put on the screen. We don't want to just accept the default columns just because Salesforce put them there, things like that. And then finally, I want to talk to you about actions that you can take, just even little things that just make a little bit of a difference in your ability to effectively report on the data within your organization. All right, everybody find a seat. Great. So first things first, it is imperative, whatever tool you report on, so long after Salesforce is gone, no, we can't say that, but whatever tool you're reporting on, really take the time to get to know the data model. So Salesforce has a number of clouds, we all know. Each of the clouds, if you dig hard enough, you can find a diagram like this and understand how the objects are organized and, more importantly, how they're connected. So Salesforce has these clouds. Within them, we have objects. So in a database model, objects correspond to tables, fields correspond to fields. It's taking a little bit of time to understand how the tables are joined will impact your reporting so much. In fact, I would say in my career, undergraduate and my master's degree, the most important class that I took for my entire career was a class at Harvard, which was a summer course, by the way. I wasn't a real student there, but it was on database management and understanding how data is organized within relational databases. Bar none, the most important class of my entire career was that, and that has helped me with reporting all these years. So to understand the data model, if you don't have access to one of these nice diagrams, you can sort of piece things together by hunting through the object manager. We also have an ancient tool called the Schema Builder. I'm curious how many of you have used the Schema Builder. So it's in setup, it's very ancient. In fact, when that was rolled out, I don't know if it was 2008 or 2010, something like that. It was originally a tool for building out your data model, but I think nowadays maybe it's more useful for just diagramming things. So you can pick a handful of objects. Let's say you're interested in reporting on marketing. You have campaigns, the campaign member history, you have accounts, contacts, leads, and you want to sort of understand those. What you can do in the Schema Builder is clear what's shown by default, select those objects from the list, and then see how they're connected. So the next thing you want to do is get to know the data within your Salesforce instance. So this sounds funny, but I think to be able to effectively report on it, you really need to know about the data well. So do we have 1 million contacts? Do we have 10 million contacts? How good is the data within those? What fields are strong? What fields are weak? So are there pockets of bad data? A really nice habit you can get into when you're reporting within an organization is actually to ask. So if you ask around, so we have a group of executives sitting right here, thank you executives, and we're in a meeting and we're talking about a particular set of KPIs, we can actually ask each one of them, how confident are you in this data? And you might say, I feel 70% confident. You say 90%, you say 10%, so we've got some issues here because even around a group of executives that are making decisions with the data we're providing, there could be a whole range of confidences in what we're working with because people, they're in the data, they know the data well. So specifically around weaknesses in the data, if there are metrics that you care about, many of them you can quantify and you can put on a dashboard like this. This is a simple dashboard of zeros. If you haven't seen this concept before, a number of people have talked about it at Dreamforce and other events. You can Google Salesforce dashboard of zeros, something like that, or zero dashboard. But if you're really concerned about open opportunities that have a close date in the past, put that number on a dashboard. If the number's above zero, that's bad. So we can just take a quick glance for things that we care about. Another suggestion I have, every time you're reporting on data that you're not familiar with, is to start to create the report and start with no filters. Just see what the number is. What are we talking about here? So it could be the numbers. I'm interested in reporting on the number of contacts that live in London. Okay, so first I'm going to just report on all the contacts in my system. Okay, we have 2 million. Good. So how many are in London? Okay, so we have 100,000. I'll just make up a number. And then we might say how many ride the tube every week. So we have 700 or whatever the number is. But I want you to get in the habit when you're first reporting on new data to just add one filter at a time rather than adding 7 filters all at once and you have 13 contacts show up and you don't really have a good sense of it. But if you add contacts one by one, you're kind of zeroing in on the data and you're learning about the data in your database. So another thing that's crucially important is to become aware of the standard report types. So there are about 75 of them. Salesforce, I think, got tired maybe 10 years ago and they stopped kind of adding more of these. So I'll talk about something that's important in a second, the custom report types. But within the standard report types, there are a number of things that are very special to the standard report types. It's good to try them out and see what is the range of data that's offered within these. Are there any special fields that are available? There are system-generated formulas sometimes. There are other fields that are just very, very unique to that one report type, that the only way you're going to learn about them is to try them out one by one, to see what's here. Another thing I want to encourage you, not just the columns that are displayed, but also the filters that are available. There is an opportunity pipeline report that has a very unusual filter, and I found it by accident. It allows you to filter on opportunities that have gone backwards. And you think, that's kind of cool. And I would have never found it if I hadn't just sort of poked around in the filters and scrolled up and down and I discovered it. So the way to find that is to, unfortunately, go through them one by one. You can see here in my screenshot that I have a number of items that are highlighted in yellow. This is a really important thing to be aware of. So of the 75 or so standard report types, quite a lot of them, I might even say 40% of them, have a with in the word. Does anybody know what the with indicates? So it's essentially telling us that there's an equijoin, and I want you to be cautious when you see equijoins, okay? Because if I have this one called accounts with account teams, you just need to know that if you report on that, you'll never see an account that has 0 account team members, right? So this is because of the nature of the join between the account object and the account teams object, the nature of the join that's used in this standard report type, that it's based on an equijoin. So if I'm doing account-based marketing, I'm very, very interested in things like accounts with or without contacts, accounts with or without opportunities. I want to see all my target accounts, even if they don't have opportunities, but if they do, that's great, show me them. The only way that we can achieve that is to use custom report types. Oh, and by the way, I host a group called Dashboard Dojo. So we meet not as regularly as we used to, but we have over 40 hours of recordings of me blathering on about this stuff. I've got a QR code on a number of these slides. So I did one on standard report types. And then on the next slide, I'll show you, we did a whole hands-on session on custom report types. I think they're super important. Okay, it looks like we got all the photos. Sorry, did I take it away from you? Sorry. So actually, this I'm going to jump back to the last slide. This one was both, I think, standard and custom report types, that dojo. But if we jump to the custom report types, if you take nothing else away from my session today, this is the single most important thing you need to learn if you aren't familiar with them. If you're not familiar with custom report types, but this allows us to create these custom data foundations. So once you create it in your system, you build it once, then other users can go ahead and create reports and then create dashboards using that data. Why is this important? Well, the first and foremost, there are more than 100 additional objects. You can't report on any other way unless someone creates a custom report type first. Kind of a silly example of this would be lightning usage metrics. Maybe it's important for some of you. There were probably 5 or so objects that we could take advantage of. But maybe more down to earth, if you're interested in reporting on the dashboards in your system, I know some of you are at large organizations, you have 10,000 dashboards in your Salesforce instance. If you want to report on the dashboards, the only way to do it is to create a custom report type. You can not only report on the dashboards, but you can also report on components. Now they're called widgets, but the dashboards and their widgets. So another important thing that we can do with custom report types is we can take advantage of what's called the left outer join. I mentioned it a moment ago. If I want to report on all my target accounts with or without their account teams, or my target accounts with or without activities, the way to achieve that is to create a custom report type. And then when you're associating the two objects, you pick the child object, which in this case is opportunities, and you have two choices of the default is an inner join, so it'll only show you the Bs that have an A and the As that have a B. That's very, very limiting, just to point that out, right? So this is kind of nice, especially for account-based marketing, because I want to see all my target accounts, and if this other stuff is there, great, show me that. What else can we do? We can relabel columns. So let's say your business has multiple divisions, and this division over here, we use slightly different words for the same columns. Well, on reporting, we can actually relabel the columns for anybody who creates a report using this custom report type. We can define which columns are set by default. This is a big win. So if you choose to create a report on opportunity report type, the standard report type, what are there, like 17 columns? And a lot of them aren't that useful in every reporting scenario. So rather than deleting all of them each time, you can create a custom report type and say which columns that you want to be available for users right away. The superpower with custom report types is something called relate fields via lookup. Has anybody used this before? Okay, awesome. I'm really excited about this. So this allows you to, from within this humble custom report type, I can reach up and grab a field from an object up above. Not only that, I can reach up to 5 object relationships up above, grab a field, and pull it back in. I can pull in fields from up to 60 different objects and pull it into this custom report type and then use it on my report. I can pull up to 1,000 fields from up to 60 objects, from up to 5 relationships up, and grab them and pull them in. This is a really nice technique when you're reporting on something low level in your system. So in my Salesforce system, we've used expense reports and expense report line items for years. I can create a custom report type on the low level item, the expense report line item, and I can reach up and pull in project information. I can reach up and pull in user information, opportunity information, or an opportunities contract information, and pull that in and then report on it. Super, super powerful. If you're not familiar with reportforce.blog, so Aaron Creer is one of the speakers here. He's a writer there, and a gentleman named Evan Ponter. Reportforce.blog, they've done a lot of really nice writing on custom report types. Awesome. All right, let's shift gears. That moment when nobody knocks on the cube wall anymore, right? So when somebody hits you on Slack and says, I need you to create something for me, could you just get it done? So that before they run away, we want to sort of tackle them and sort of get what we need out of them to create their vision. So they have something in mind, maybe they don't fully understand what they want, but we can't let them run off before we get what we need. So the first thing I want you to do is have a set of questions ready. So just have there's sort of a really nice set of questions. This is absolutely not an exhaustive list. I think I got tired when I was creating this slide. Probably the most important question is, what business decisions are you trying to make? So if you're an admin or you're an analyst or you're sort of somebody just a super user creating reports, please take the time to understand, all right, what are we trying to decide here? Like what are you trying to do with this information? Who's going to use this information? How often are you using it? If somebody came to me and said, well, this is for the board, I might think a little differently about it than if it's for Larry in accounting that, he's a nice guy, but he's not that helpful. So who is the intended audience is important. That can also help you decide, should we limit access? So we put reports and dashboards into folders, and then we control the sharing to those folders. We essentially invite users in to see what's in that folder. That's an important thing to know. I would always want to know where the data is coming from. So they may have an idea where they think the data is coming from, but we actually might have to dig in and sort of say, well, it's really not from where you think it is, it's from somewhere else. It's helpful to know who owns that data. Are there any issues with the data? We might need to do a little cleanup. One of the realities, even if you create the best report in the world or the best dashboard in the world, if the underlying data is kind of crappy, you're sort of lumped in with that problem. It's partly your problem, even though you're creating. So I would ask that question if there are any issues that they know of. That may help you sort of get out ahead of that. It's good to know what columns they want to see. Are there any particular calculations? Should the data be grouped? How do you want it filtered? All that stuff. Anyone else have another question pop to mind that we should have on our list? It's not an exhaustive list, but I want you to have your list ready anytime somebody comes to you and says, could you please build this? Sorry, did somebody say one? No? Okay. So this is a real life example. An operating partner at a private equity firm reached out and he said, there's this thing that I create in Excel every week for all 20 of our portfolio companies. And I said, yikes, that's terrible. So I asked the question, how many of your portfolio companies use Salesforce? The answer was all of them. So that was encouraging. And what we did was we went through every single column one by one. What is industry? How good is the data? Where is the data coming from? I'm glad I asked, because in this case, it wasn't the standard account industry column. It was some other column that he wanted to come from. So we went through every single column. What does this one here mean? It's accounts. What does that number mean? Okay, it's a count of accounts. Is it just target accounts? Is it all of the accounts in the system? We went through every single column one by one and determined what it is that he's actually showing. You can't take anything for granted. Please leave your assumptions at the door. Some of these were surprising to me, how he did the calculation. It's another reality when you're working with executives. You can work with two executives at the same company, and one says the conversion ratio should be this, and another says the conversion ratio should be that, and you really need to figure that out. So we went through all of this, and what was really exciting, we realized we needed one custom report type, we needed 4 formula fields, and we needed a very complicated joined report. But we did it. We got all of the columns except for one, and the one that we didn't include was total addressable market, TAM. And the challenge in Salesforce is it doesn't do target versus actual very well, right? So I think if those of you that have been reporting, you know that. So we just kind of put that one to the side for a moment. But we were able to build this all out. And oh, by the way, we did a dashboard dojo on how to build this out step by step. It was really one of my favorite dojos. and the QR code is right here on the left. So here's an example of what we did. We talked through every single column, and we realized that we needed some formula fields. And what we did is we used the power of one. Has anybody created a power of one formula? So literally, you're creating a custom formula field that outputs the number 1. So it's the simplest formula you'll ever write, but that gives us some flexibility to do things like counting. So I use that over and over for counting accounts, for counting number of new opportunities created, for counting the number of won deals, and there was one more column of opportunities counted. So we discussed the source for each column. Can we group the similar data points? So I did need to make one change to make this work. I had to reorganize some of the columns, but he was okay with that. The reason I did that was to use a joined report and be able to produce this. What was also exciting in the conversation was actually taking what he gave me in Excel and saying, well, here are a few other things we could do. Would you like to do this to enhance it? This is probably one of the coolest things I've done in reporting in 18 years, 19 years now, reporting in Salesforce. So that's why I thought to share that. All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk about actually what you see when you create reports. So it's very, very important to manage real estate. So the real estate, these columns left to right, just because Salesforce put a bunch of columns here doesn't mean you should leave them there. Here's an example. So I have a report on won opportunities this quarter. When you use the opportunity standard report type, it includes the expected revenue column, the probability column, and the next step column. Now, those 3 columns are kind of useless when you're talking about won opportunities because it's going to be 100% probability all the time. And the expected revenue is 100% times the amount, so that's sort of useless as well. I want to argue that you should look at every single column when you create a report and sort of make a decision, is this really helping anyone, and get rid of them if they're not. I actually will often go one step further, that I'll use this handy action menu next to the columns. So when you're in the Lightning Report Builder, we have that choice to remove all columns. It's so fast to add new columns that I sort of like to just wipe them all out and then add exactly what I want. So another trick with reporting is to start thinking about, can we establish some consistency? Can we have the same column order whenever we're reporting on pipeline reports, or whenever we're reporting on cases, let's say open cases, to start using the same column order? And it's not just on reports, you could also do the same thing on list views. There's something really nice about that when you see it in a system. It just feels very crisp when you see a very similar order. It's easier for the end users to grasp what they're looking at. I'm a big fan of adding a little bit of color. We now have the ability to completely overload our reports with 5 conditional columns, the conditional formatting columns. That could be 15 colors. It's just way too much. One thing I'm a fan of is just showing one color, and a trick to do that is you have your summary column on the report. To add conditional formatting, the default is that it has the red, orange, green, or the red, yellow, green. You don't have to show all 3 colors. So there are little X's to the right of the conditional formatting rule window here, and I can get rid of one of them. So I can pick whichever one I want to get rid of. And the next trick is that you can, for the second color, use no color. So that leaves you with one color, and that can really highlight an anomaly in the data, either a good anomaly or a bad anomaly, or just something that you want to report on. So in this case, I'm reporting on open pipeline by sales rep and by stage, and I'm reporting on all the low, very, very low, and we can just sort of visually see what's going on. So it looks like the greatest concentration is at the bottom of our sales funnel. Our team doesn't need to, they don't know how to close deals. Maybe we need to do sales training on that. So we can see it visually based on something like this. Another thing to point out is that there are millions of colors available. if you want to embarrass someone, don't embarrass them with red. Give them a good old, like, really, like neon pink or something, you know? Or you could use your corporate color. So you literally have millions of colors available. We can do that by clicking on the custom sub-tab here and then using the whole wheel of colors. I think you can also enter hex values if you have them. Please, please, please use report descriptions. These are not required. You can write 255 characters. That's about a sentence and a half or 2 sentences. The standard I want you to hold is if you have a beloved family member that is sight impaired, you would actually take the time to explain whatever it is that you're showing them, right? I know this sounds funny, but I want you to have that as your goal, that if somebody, here's an example here, this particular report, it's a dashboard report. Okay, that's telling me keep your paws off. Don't mess this report up. Showing all open opportunities, and then you have the word by, that's indicating a grouping by sales owner with a close date in this fiscal quarter. So that ending part of the sentence is the filter, like what are we looking at? Try to write a good description. It's very helpful to your leadership or whoever's using the reports. All right, so I'm not sure if this is a space shuttle or some rocket or something like that, but I promise you, your leadership team, when you introduce a new dashboard and you're so excited, you're so proud of yourself, this is what it looks like to them, okay? So if you don't take the time to, sort of give a few things like push this button first, right? Push this button to turn it on. I was in my friend's Cybertruck the other day. So the Cybertruck is rolled out in North America. It's really cool. There's no on button. You just open the door and you sit in, you close the door, and it's on. There's a whole bunch of things like that. So I was looking for the on button, but couldn't find it. So the second thing with these widgets and titles and footers is, you can take advantage of them. So on a dashboard, each widget has a title, a subtitle, and then also has a footer. And you can use this to describe what is shown. A little more information about these. The title can be up to 80 characters wide. It's a bigger font on top. The subtitle, oddly, is in a smaller font and only 40 characters. I don't know why that's true. The footer can be a very hefty 255 characters, but there's a real gotcha. So way back when I was a boy in Salesforce Classic, the footer on a dashboard component, or now called widgets, would wrap. But nowadays in Lightning, they don't wrap. So it's just truncated. So you want to pay attention to that. So whatever you write here in the footer, in the properties for that widget, you just want to make sure that it fits within the width of your component so that you're not leaving your users hanging. So they're like, this is so important because, and then it's lopped off, right? They can't see it. Another thing that I like to encourage, much like I got a haircut before I flew across the pond, like this guy. Well, not quite like that guy. But with any dashboard, especially if you're new, I encourage you to take advantage of the Save As functionality. So you can look at a dashboard, choose Save As, save a copy in your own private folder, and just tinker with it. You're not breaking the original. Unless you change the underlying reports, you're not breaking the original dashboard. But it's a wonderful way to get to know how to work with dashboards. So there are things like the color palette. So we have here, I think there are 14 color palette colors. This is watermelon on a dark. I really like watermelon. It's my color. Whereas this is on a light theme, and it has, I think this one is called fire. But the information kind of pops out differently depending on what you choose. Another thing to consider is the sizing of the components. I'll talk about that in a moment. But certainly the arrangement, how you're putting things. How many components can we now have, or widgets, sorry. How many widgets can we now have? So the number changed. It's now 25. However, only 20 can be this type of widget. Only 20. The extra 5 can be text. So that's odd, but it was 20 for many, many years. If you put 20 widgets on a dashboard, that's an awfully busy dashboard. Remember a couple slides ago? So we're starting to get into this territory when you have that many things on a single dashboard. Another thing to consider, so there are now 13 widgets available. Each one of them has its own unique properties. Please take the time to actually look at the different properties. I'll give you a few examples. So for a horizontal bar, we have the ability to plot on a second axis, so we can include another axis over on the other side. We can plot a line chart instead of having two bars next to each other, so that's kind of nice superpower for that. For a horizontal stacked, we have the ability to stack to 100%, which is kind of cool. For a line chart, we have the ability to show cumulative over the progression of time. Line charts get very, very busy very quickly. I think they're best used for items showing a series or a progression over time and with not too many lines. If you have too many lines, it truly looks like spaghetti. It's not really sharing much information. But if you have a few lines, it can be very valuable, and then you have that extra capability to do cumulative. So with a table, a lightning table, this is the most powerful type of widget you can put on a dashboard. It is unlike any of the others. All of the others are based on the underlying report, sort of religiously adhering to that underlying report, whereas a lightning table works a little differently. It says, yeah, it's wonderful that you gave me a source report, but it kind of ignores the report and it uses the underlying report type. Now what that means is, so for these other ones, let's say I have a report that has 7 columns, I can use just 7 columns. So if I create a lightning table on a report that has 7 columns, I can use thousands of columns from the underlying source report type. So it kind of ignores your report a little bit and lets you go actually to the source. There's also grouping capabilities, there's conditional formatting, there's a number of things we can do. We can put totals at the bottom. And the way to dig into that is to go into the properties and really look around, because there's more there. There are some gotchas that I want you to be aware of. They have to do with the donut and the funnel. And they're kind of similar. So the donut combines small groups into others. I don't think that should be the default. And also the limit by default is 6, that it'll show 6 groupings. A lot of times we're showing 8 groupings or 10 groupings in a donut. Once you get beyond 10, it starts to get way too busy. The human eye just can't really perceive all of these little very narrow pizza slices. But I think that we'll often use them more than 6, so just note the default. Similarly with the funnel, this is one of those shame on Salesforce moments that the default is 6 for a funnel. That's crazy. Most of us in our sales process have more than 6 open stages. So when I show a funnel, I don't want it to be limited to 6. Even worse than that, more egregious than that, is that Salesforce by default combines small groups into others. So what that means is I could be looking at a funnel, I could be really excited about my funnel, but it's combined the contracts phase with the qualification phase because they're both kind of limited, and it's put them in some other spot. So I do not think this should be default, and I think the default should be more than 6. So just be aware of both of those when using funnels. One last thing to note, when you add a widget to a dashboard, it is not size optimized. Salesforce is just plopping that on. You need to take the time to hover over the right-hand side and hover across the bottom. If you see a gray scroll bar, what that means is that there's information sort of hanging off the side. Please don't leave scroll bars in your dashboard widgets. People don't want to use scroll bars within your widgets. So either resize it or use the max groups displayed to make it into a top 10 list or something. So this is the same widget, and I've just sort of made it wider here. This is how many things were lopped off by default because Salesforce is not size optimizing. Another thing to consider with the widget sizing is that many of the widgets are a little too roomy. A funnel doesn't need to be as wide as it is. You can actually make it narrower, and it stays the same size. It just got rid of some white space. So please take the time when you're adding widgets to a dashboard to resize them. All right, let's talk about some actions. So the first action I want you to take is to embrace trending. There are probably 6 or 7, I don't know the number of tools within Salesforce reporting to support trending. Trending is the thing that your leadership team desperately craves and needs, but doesn't often have. So what does trending do for us? It tells us where we came from and are we going in the right direction? Some of the trending requires nothing special at all. So this is opportunities, and it's grouped twice on the close date. This is why there's a close date number 2, just so you know. And that predates formula fields. So yes, I'm that old in the Salesforce world that I remember before formulas. But there are 2 close date fields on an opportunity because we might want to do something like this and do month over month within year trending. I don't need to do anything special if I'm doing it on the created date, for example. It's just there and available. I just need to know how to do the groupings. Some of the trending capabilities require some more awareness. It may also require some admin skills. There's field history tracking. There's a feature called historical trending. I like this. It shows me what changed since last week. Really nice thing. Did it change good or change bad since last week? And then finally, we have reporting snapshots that are ancient within Salesforce, but still useful. You can use reporting snapshots to structure data and store data in a way to do something like this. So this is 52 weeks of open pipeline all smushed next to each other, but this tells a story. This particular company, the sales doubled in this year. You think, wait a minute, that's incredible. So what that means is that they were constantly, marketing was feeding new leads in to keep this. This isn't telling me the sales, this is telling me the pipeline, but it's telling me a story of the pipeline. My suggestion if you're doing something like this is to always put the lowest stage in your sales funnel at the bottom, so the contract stage. So it resembles a funnel, but it's just sort of a square or rectangular funnel. Okay, does that make sense? And that's using reporting snapshots. Again, on the Dashboard Dojo site, if you go to the recordings, it's literally just dashboarddojo.com. I have recordings on all of this stuff if you're interested in how to use it and set it up. This suggestion is one that I realized now 20 years ago. I worked for 3 software companies. The third one, I was the corporate apps manager by day, and at night, I was the ops guy. So after playing foosball for hours and drinking lots of caffeine, listening to loud music, I would stay in the office by myself and work on the reporting because it was fun. And the best decision I made after creating some cool reporting was to ask, can I just sit in the meeting and like hear what you guys are talking about? And it was amazing. Like, it's amazing what you learn. Has anybody done this? Has anybody sat? Okay, great. And it's like, how are they talking about what you created? It's amazing how much they don't understand about what you created. And similarly, it's good to know what decisions are being made. Now, if you have that opportunity, maybe you need to sit in the corner a little quietly, not sort of interrupt them, but listen for misunderstandings. You don't have to correct them there. You can take them aside elsewhere afterwards. You also listen for the words if only. So if they say, gosh, this is amazing. If only we could see it, you could sit in the corner, use the save as feature, make a couple of modifications, and you could actually have something meaningful. Now, instead of giving it to them in that moment, you need to tell them you need to work from home for a week or two to get it done. But sometimes you can really quickly clone, or you can add some filters or make a few changes that are very meaningful just by what you learn. When I sat in a room and I asked to sit in the room, I became worth, and this is US dollars, I was worth $20,000 more to them instantly because I was aware of what they were talking about. I was aware of what they needed. That company went through rounds and rounds of layoffs. I was the guy very depressed because I was by myself at the end, but they kept me on because I knew what they needed. And it was all because I asked the question, can I just sit? Because I don't think you guys are getting what we're doing here. Which you have to be careful with, right? Because executives get a little upset about that. So 2 more suggestions. One is to establish a glossary of terms. This can be a gift, especially to new people, new executives coming into your organization. If there are KPIs or something like the XYZ ratio, they don't know what that means. You may not know what it means. You might need to get to the bottom of it, but start documenting it as a gift within your organization. You become the keeper of terms if you start a document like this. All right, so last thing is, two things. One, when you roll out new reports and dashboards, please train users on them. Think of it as if you're rolling out a new system. Please train them. The last suggestion I have is to play. This is the best way to get good at this stuff. Just play. Take one report. This is one report, and I tried out every single one of the widgets using one report over and over, and just had some fun. The line chart looks terrible. Some of them actually look pretty good. It's the same report over and over, and this is how you get good at it, is to play. All right, I think we're out of time. So guys, I hope you have a great rest of your time at London's Calling.